Hello everyone and welcome to our industry night this evening. My name is Julianne Watling-McCarthy and I'm the Artistic Director here at the Stage Door. This is our first industry event, which is part of our Arts Council Audience and Artist Development Programme that we've got for this year. And we've collaborated with MAST Mayflower Studios to bring together some industry nights that are just kind of put together for a bit of networking and a bit of sort of information giving. So I'd like to introduce you to Josh, who's from MAST Mayflower Studios, and he'll tell you a little bit more about the network, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I don't know if I need a microphone. Can you hear me? I'll use the microphone. That's fine. I'll use the mic. So the Artist Development Programme, those of you that don't know about it, we have a range of opportunities for artists at different stages of career, but also art form as well. So opportunities like scratch nights in order to show back work in progress and get audience feedback, all the way up to residencies and seed commissions. We've just launched, in collaboration with Julianne and Stage Door, Script in Hand, where we're supporting 4 local writers who are have written a new play, and they're working with a director and some actors to develop that work further. We've got an associate programme as well for artists, again, of all stages of career, an art form to come and work with us in association for 20 months. And develop new pieces of work and receive mentoring and guidance and free rehearsal space as well. So lots of different things, as well as programming more work by local artists as part of our shout season, which happens in the spring and the autumn of each year as well. So lots of opportunities, and I'm sure after the conversation here we can talk a bit more about it if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Josh. That's great. Yeah, and if you check on our website, basically, we've got the Stage Door programme, so you'll see the different strands there. So we've got new musical theatre, new theatre, young people's music, and new bands. So there's lots of events happening this year. So yeah, check those out. And a lot of them are either free to attend or pay what you decide. So you're all very welcome to come to those. But we're really lucky tonight that we've got 2 of my close friends here, Sam Quested and Michael Cox. So Sam, I'll ask them to introduce themselves and tell you about themselves, because it's just a bit easier, I think, than me giving a biography. But Sam started work here when we very first opened the venue. So he was here like helping paint ceilings and walls and kind of get the venue up and running, and then helped us launch our kind of programme and produce some shows that were here, and kind of very quickly made himself that person who could sort of do anything, I think, and sort of made himself very indispensable. And I think that is probably what's contributed to him propelling himself forward in his career so greatly and so quickly that he's done. So yeah, he's doing really well. So I'll ask him some questions in a moment. And then Michael Cox, we went to drama school together many moons ago, so not that long ago, was it? We won't talk about how long ago it was. So yeah, so we met at drama school, and so Michael started in a performance background and then has moved into casting, so he's now a casting director with his own company, Hammond Cox Casting, and again I'll let him tell you a bit more about that. So Sam, if we start with you, could you give us a brief bit of background about who you are, where you started and what it is you do today?
Yes. Hello, everybody. So I actually studied at Winchester University and ended up living in Winchester for many, many years. And then from the back of that, I then fell into the kind of Amdram world of directing and producing. And funny enough, I did a show, and then Julianne, that's how I then met Julianne. And then we came to the Stage Door, and as Julianne said, we opened up this amazing venue that was very different to any other venue in Southampton and in the Hampshire area, I believe. And we managed to produce some, I thought, some really great musicals. We did a few plays, and yes, I did sometimes perform, and not that I was very good. But that then went on to various things in the years. I mean, that was back in, God, I can't remember the years now, but I then fell into meeting other people, ended up working in the world of magic. That was a different art form that I never thought I'd ever delve into. And then from that, just met various different directors and producers. I then directed a few things in London, assistant directed and directed a lovely play called Old Fools. I went to start a playhouse, and then met another person, actually. His name's Darren Bell, who actually got me into producing concerts. So I do one-off concerts, various artists, either from Broadway or from the UK, or actually overseas, internationally. And from one concert, I did a concert. It was with Cheetah Rivera, who actually sadly passed away last year. And then from that, I then got offered a job as a general manager for a production company who've now changed names. I now work for a company called Adama Entertainment, who produce live entertainment all over the world. I produced various musicals, Curtains, Wedding Singer, Rock of Ages that went on tour, and I'm currently producing the UK and Ireland tour of Bonnie and Clyde. I actually went to the Mayflower a couple of weeks ago, and I'm also in rehearsals currently for a brand new musical, which is Burlesque. I don't know if you know the movie. I had Cher and Christina Aguilera, but we're doing the first musical adaptation of that, and it's been in development for 7 years. So we finally got it off its feet, put it into in its first rehearsal room, which is we literally started last week. And that show is going to Manchester, then it's doing Glasgow, then we're going back to Manchester, and then in the West End next year. So
Amazing.
that's kind of where I am currently. Anyway.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. That gives us a nice overview. And Michael, the same too. Do you want me to tell you the questions again, or?
No, it's okay.
No, you're
Yeah, it's
okay.
I
Good.
think so, yeah.
Okay.
Hello. So, yeah, as Julianne said, we were at drama school together 22 years ago. And I was an actor for about 10 years after that. Just about, not even quite, actually. And whilst I was acting, I mostly performed in theatre, some on-screen stuff, but lots of theatre shows and touring shows and things like that. And then when I was doing that, I finished a show and in the West End, and as we were finishing, one of the other performers in it said to me then, what are you going to do now? And I didn't have a job. I said, I don't know really. And she said, you should come and work at this casting studio that I work at sometimes. We need some help, if you like. And the funny thing was, at that time, I was so kind of in my 20s and like purist actor. I remember I contacted a friend, and I said, another actor, and I said, someone's asked me to go and work in a casting studio. Do you think I should do it? And he said, no, you definitely shouldn't do that because you'll just end up being a casting director. And I said, I'm going to do it. I need the money. And he was right. I did end up being a casting director, so it was a bit of a... He was totally right about that. But so I went and worked in this casting studio just on reception. And it's funny, really, because I feel like it's indicative of how the times are different. Because I did that, and I was still, never worked in casting before. This is sort of pre-digital age. We used to film all the castings and literally put tapes in an envelope and post them off. And I think within 2 weeks of doing that, I was directing the casting sessions. They sort of immediately just thought, you seem like you know what you're doing, and you can start sort of working on and directing the casting sessions. And that studio was owned by two cast directors, Nina Gold and Sasha Robertson. And I then sort of fell into working for them, working in their offices, running their casting sessions. I was freelancing and started working with other casting directors, Rosalie Clayton, Rachel Freck, people like that. And then it sort of did that for years. And as that time progressed, I was doing that between acting jobs. And I sort of started then acting a bit less and doing more and more of that. And in 2011, my business partner now, Tom Hammond, he was running the casting studios at Spotlights in London. And he'd sort of come to the end of the road with that a little bit. And he was sort of trying to nudge me in the direction of setting up a company together, which we did, and we sort of planned that for a year, and that was in 2012 we sort of started operating, and we both just gave up all our other work and stopped working for all the people that I had been working for years, and just sort of went for it, and slowly managed to get a foothold and keep going. And we sort of, we're 12 years, 13 years nearly down the road now, and we work mostly in on-screen stuff. We do lots of commercials, lots of music videos, short films, little bits of drama, mostly everything on camera, really. We have done bits of theatre, but that's sort of in our past. I don't think we'll will focus much on that or do much of that in the future. So we do a lot of that kind of work, and we work internationally with Europe and the States. And you know, I feel very lucky. What we do has changed dramatically since the pandemic. One of the best parts about our job previously was that I spent every day surrounded by people. We had a building in London, and we used to cast everything we did through there. We'd have hundreds of actors coming through every week. That has changed a lot now, and a lot of my work is based off of people submitting tapes to us, and the process sort of progresses from there. So there's perhaps some interesting bits around that, but a lot of what we do is that now, and then we'll meet actors at recalls and stuff like that. So that's the field of work.
Great, thank you, Michael. Josh, I think the next couple of questions have probably been answered. So if we move on to, what would you say to anyone here that feels overwhelmed about growing their careers in the industry?
Fine, yeah. I think that, I would say this, I suppose, is that what you end up doing, Josh is a good example of this, I am to an extent, is not necessarily what you set out to do in the first place. And remaining open whilst being determined to do what you want to do is probably a really important thing to sustain a career, because it might be that the industry is encouraging you in one direction, which isn't necessarily what you set out to do, or in your heart of hearts would love to do. I would suggest remaining open to those opportunities and exploring them, because they in themselves may be way more rewarding than you initially anticipated. It's interesting, I'll say that this is sort of tangential. My partner's a writer. Part of the reason I gave up being an actor is my partner's a writer. And when she wrote her first play, and it went on at the Royal Court in London, and I remember when she told me, oh, they're going to put on my play, and I was sort of astounded by that. And then I sort of saw how that progressed for her. And she was a performer as well. She wasn't really a writer to start with, but that kind of happened. And I saw how her life changed. And it sort of made me, in a way, that was what made me be open to other opportunities, because I realized then that doors opened for her, or the industry sort of opened up for her and said, look, we're interested in this, what you have to offer in this respect. And I kind of realized at that point that as an actor, I was sort of wading forward and trying to keep performing and being an actor, whereas casting was saying, come over here, come and do more of this, and opening its doors to me. And actually, once I sort of gave into that and went for it, it was incredibly rewarding. And I never, ever regretted that or looked back to it. So I would say mostly just remaining open to what's out there. And you have to be focused and have to be determined, but not being blinkered at the same time, I would suggest.
I totally agree. And that's kind of what happened, like, with my own past, where, like, you know, I thought, I'll be an actor. That's where I wanted to go. And I think it was just kind of a realization, as Michael said, that you being open to the vast options that are out there in the industry is something that I've learned massively along the way. You know, I went into directing to begin with. I then fell into something completely different in the producing side of stuff, and I found a different love for theatre because of that. And luckily, you know, there's been like a really weird full circle moment where I actually got asked to come back to Winchester University to discuss one of their modules, which was a class as an industry module. And I was actually brought in to actually talk to potential performers who wanted to go and take this as a career, but given them the insight into other opportunities within the industry, so they don't just come focused on one thing, and if they're let down by that one thing, they then leave the industry altogether or lose their passion. And you know, so it was a nice thing to actually go into a room and not talk about being an actor, but actually talk about the industry as a whole. And I think that's something that I've learned across the years of being in it, that, you know, there are so many opportunities out there of what you can do, and you'll be surprised what you actually might fall in love with, which is something that I found quite interesting.
Brilliant, thank you. So you've both touched on, you know, you've gone through different paths and to get to where you've got to, and you've both worked on some really interesting projects. What would be the standout one for you, that standout project that you've worked on? I really love what I'm doing.
I think currently now, the production I'm working on now, I mean, every show has its own different thing that's different to, you know, the other project that you've worked on. But one in particular is Burlesque. I think it's just the whole aspect of this show. It's the biggest show I've ever worked on. You know, it has a team of around about 120 people involved backstage, you know, in a sense of like, you know, sort of the actors, and you know, it's been given this IP that everyone knows and loves and adores, and it has this crazy cult following. And to be at the helm of something that you're originating, that's, you know, the first time it's ever been seen on stage, for me, you know, creating a brand new musical, I would say probably one of the best in my career.
My work is perhaps a little different, and I don't necessarily have one project that I would say that about. I think the aspect of my work about which I feel like that is really the collaboration and working with people. And we were talking about sort of, I was really interesting you said about people not leaving the industry, you know, because they did their first choice thing, didn't come off being an actor, for example. And I do think that's a really interesting point, because what I have found about the skills that I built up as an actor, or had as an actor, the empathy that one has to be an actor, has meant that the most rewarding part of my job, I suppose, is steering people through a process with empathy and with care, and through a casting process. And you know, I can, from a performance perspective and from a production perspective too, I try to build that bridge between those two entities, between the people who are auditioning for things and production. And I think that helping performers through that, giving them the circumstances to do their best, I suppose, and settling them to the point where they can sort of show the best of themselves, is probably the skill that I've developed more than any other over the years. And it's the part of my job that I find most rewarding. I work on projects that turn over very quickly, and multiple projects all the time. So it's hard to pinpoint one exactly, but that, being in a room with people, making sure that we all feel on an equal level, and that everyone can be calm, and that we can talk openly, and then allowing people to do their thing, is the most rewarding part of what I do. And it's kind of the bit that I miss the most post-pandemic, really. I get to do that way less than I used to because of the nature of things now. But that's the aspect of my job I like the most.
Thank you. And would you say there are any standout challenges that you've had to overcome in your projects or careers to date?
Let me get my list out.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, the pandemic is one. I mean, frankly, that. Like, I'm sure that was a massive impact, obviously, for live performances. That was a point in time when literally everything stopped, and it was hard to know whether it was going to come back. And I mean, at that point in time, we were, as I mentioned, we operated we actually had 2 buildings in London that we were renting and running castings through, and our office team through, and we had to sustain all of that through the pandemic and through, you know, a kind of zero work happening at that point in time. That was very challenging. And I think also then kind of coming back out the other end of that, probably things are settling now. It feels like this year, perhaps the back end of last year, there's a bit more consistency with work. But prior to that, I think there was a really long period where actors and certainly were really trying to work out how the new landscape worked for them, in terms of auditioning for things and being put forward for things. And so much of their work became submitting casting tapes for things, which previously had been some of the time, but not most of the time. And now all of a sudden actors were being asked to submit tapes for lots of projects all the time, and spent a lot of time at home auditioning for things, sending off tapes into the ether, and then perhaps not hearing anything about it afterwards. And that caused a lot of difficulty and sort of emotional turmoil for them. And I was sort of part of the sort of process. I'm part of the CDG, which is the Casting Directors Guild, who liaise with Equity and Spotlight 2 are involved in that, in sort of trying to, again, build bridges with performers and make sure and agents too, to make sure that everyone is being cared for within the process, and navigating the year or two after the pandemic, once work had come back, but things were happening in a radically different way to how they were, was a big challenge. You know, and it was incredibly emotionally stressful and tiring, because we just had the trying to stay alive from the pandemic, and that sort of, we managed to come out of that difficult period, and then there was a new landscape that was there, and everyone was uncertain about how things were going to work and what the new challenges were, and that was hard to navigate too.
Sam, how about you?
Yeah, no, that was one of the biggest factors for me. I mean, I've not been doing this for a very long time, and the biggest factor was coming out of the pandemic, and it was, as a producer, you want to present work to an audience, but there was this thing where audience members didn't want to take a risk on newer stuff. So there was this landslide of any of the new work was really struggling on a touring circuit regionally, which, we had a few shows out at that time, and, they really suffered astronomically, actually. And, even like an entity like Bonnie and Clyde, like if I would say Bonnie and Clyde, everyone kind of knows Bonnie and Clyde as the murderous duo, but if I was to sell that as a commercial producer, would an audience member take a risk on a new musical they've never heard of? And actually nowadays, I think the risk is much higher, where people don't want to take that risk and spend that money, and they'd rather spend the money on, no offense, but, if Les Mis was coming around in town again, or if you're Phantom of the Opera, you're Lion King, the bigger, well-known IP brands. So we're having to rethink our module of how we want to present new work. We are still developing. We're developing brand new musicals currently, not just burlesque as well. But, we're still having to think strategically on how we present that to an audience where the risk is still to our customers. And that's what we're finding really difficult.
How do you, with something like burlesque, how do you arrive at that show? Like, you're obviously, part of your job will be to look for IP that's out there that can be put into shows. Does that come to you, or is it a difficult process to find that?
It varies. So, for instance, sometimes we'll go out looking for the IP. So there's certain things that we know is, has a strong commercial aspect, but nothing's happened with it, either whether it's just been on TV. So, for instance, we're developing a brand new musical. Has anyone heard of the movie Midnight Cowboy? So Midnight Cowboy obviously was a movie in the 80s. Robert Redford? Is that right? Yes, God. Just trying to remember the own work. And, that's a thing where we knew that had such a strong following back in the 80s, and would it be relevant now? And, yeah, we do go looking for IP, but sometimes we do get IP come to us as well.
Sorry, can I just ask what IP is?
Intellectual property. So so basically how that works is, for instance, the book writer, the director and writer of the movie of Burlesque owns the IP, and he's actually working with us currently on the stage version as our book writer and producer. But yeah, it's varies.
Brilliant, thank you, Sam. So this one is more directed to you, but Michael, if you've got any thoughts, jump in. So I'm sure there's people that are, identified as producers or directors here, or just generally those that are, creating theatre, creating live performance. What would you say to people that, are looking to raise their profile, make significant progress in the industry with their work and what they want to do?
I would always, I don't want to sound corny or cheesy or whatever, but, it's hard work. It's hard graft. And, I always say this to anybody that I speak to, whether it's the students at the university or, even, discussions like this, is that, excuse my turn of phrase, is that, you have to do a lot of shit to get into the good. And I only say that because that's just from my own personal experience. And I think it's just about sheer determination. Building one's profile, that comes with many levels of degree of kind of how you want to present yourself as an artist, whether you're a solo performer, a musician, an actor, or even working in any field of the industry. It's just, if you really want it, you will go get it. And it just takes some hard work. And trust me, like I've done jobs where, you know, you don't get paid for it, but at the end of the day, it's just the experience and the learning that you gain from those said experiences, which then progresses on to further things. And I do believe that, you know, if you do work really, really hard, you can get far.
I think then to lead on from that, Sam, there's so many other roles in the theatre and career pathways. What would you say is like a standout quality of someone that you would want to work with?
A standout quality is that just be a nice person. I tell you what, that goes such a long way. You know, in the years I've been doing this now, there are, dare I say it, we do have a black book. We have a black book where if we work with people and they are not a nice person, they will go in that black book and we will never work with them again. You know, I feel like being a nice person doesn't cost anything. And in this industry, weirdly, in this industry in particular, I feel like there's this old mentality of how people need to present themselves. And I tell you what, that's a generation that needs to be wiped out because that's not how it needs to be anymore. There are still some issues going on in the industry that I believe still need to be overcome, and we are getting there. But for me, just be a bloody nice person, and it goes a long way.
I've got something to add to that as well. I think that alongside that, something that I would, over years, and you know, I employ people, and the thing that is the most sort of exciting quality you find in a person that you employ, apart from being a nice person, is also people who just get stuff done. Yeah. Like anyone who just can get stuff done without, you know, fanfare necessarily, or just to pick up tasks and do them, is absolute gold. And it's weird, but it's not weird, but they are rarer than you might imagine. They immediately stand out. And that quality of someone being asked to do something, or there being a task to do, and someone saying, "Yeah, I'll have a go at that," it progresses people so quickly. I think I'm sure part of your producing career comes from that, because it's not a quality that everyone has, and I think that if you can push yourself in that direction, which means opening yourself up to failure, it really does help.
That's a good thing to say. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you both. So moving on to the world of casting, Michael, what can an actor do to get noticed? You know, how important is a good headshot?
Well, it's funny that you say that. I think I saw that that question. I think that the funny thing about headshots, I believe these days, is that the overall quality of them is a lot higher than it used to be. There used to be a much more kind of mixed sort of picture or landscape with headshots in the past, and I think things have progressed along quite a lot now.
I wish I had my headshot from drama school.
Yeah,
yours
I mean, you know, like
as what not to do.
As you know, we'll all remember, like not that long ago, most headshots were black and white. They were somewhat kind of theatrical. They were also kind of dictated by a handful of photographers who kind of had a major hold on headshot photography in the industry. And that's kind of gone away a little bit, I think. All the headshots now are much more modern, are colour. There's a kind of greater facility to have a few headshots as part of your kind of gallery on Spotlight or whatever casting platform you're on. So it means that there's a little bit less pressure on any one individual photograph. I think that in terms of being noticed, I mean, that is a long game as well, I believe, as much as anything else. And I think that for an actor, the main thing that you can do is to make sure that you are alive to the industry and aware of what's going on, and that you are, again, open to failure, because that, I mean, obviously that's a major part of being a performer. And really then just being there at the moment that the role you're perfect for comes around, that you're present for it. I think that the acting landscape now, the pool of actors in the UK is vast. And it's why productions come from all over the world to cast. In London, there's a massive talent pool, a highly talented performers pool here. And so I think that what that means, because it's such a large pool of talent, is that very often people are casting to type. That goes for short form things like I work in, and it goes for lots of drama as well. I mean, obviously there are larger roles where performers are going to play all sorts of characters, but I think that for lots of your day player roles in smaller productions, TV, film, commercial, all those types of things, people are going to be casting quite specifically because they can, because the landscape, because the marketplace allows them to do it. For example, if you're looking for a character that's from Manchester, then you will see Mancunian actors for it. You're not going to see people from the south putting on an accent because you just don't need to. And largely people are looking for authenticity in their casting in a way perhaps that they were more open to not that in the past. So what I mean by that then, I suppose, is how to stand out as an actor is to celebrate the things that make you an individual. You know, to really push the idea of, I'm from Southampton, I've got this kind of accent, I'm this kind of person, here are the other interests and skills that I have, and make sure they're visible as part of your kind of casting CV on Spotlight or wherever that's housed. Because I think that those are the things ultimately that people will end up finding you through those things. And it'll mean that when a part comes up for you that you're really right for, you are in the mix for it. Because the casting director or whomever's casting it will be able to see that as part of your CV. That's really important.
And how important is Spotlight? Would you say that's still as important as it always has?
Yeah, even more than ever, I think, because it's actually, in this country now, there was a sort of, Casting Networks was another casting platform that had sort of come over here and was sort of making some headway in the marketplace, but they have now become, Spotlight has been bought by Casting Networks, and it's really quite singular in terms of professional work, Spotlight being the main platform for that. There are benefits to that and there are downsides to it, but it does mean that I think if you want to be properly visible for good quality work, then you should try and aim to be on Spotlight.
And Michael, this is another one for you. So living in a digital world where taped auditions are more and more the trend, what key bits of advice can you give actors to prepare for and produce taped auditions, and are there any no-goes?
I don't know if there are any no-goes, particularly. I think that taped auditions are really hard, right? Because I think the main thing I would say is just to watch back what you've done, really, and to try to get into an objective headspace where you can watch what you've done and either self-edit or kind of note to yourself as best you possibly can. It's very, very hard. And obviously how well that works comes partly from the information that you're given as performers. And part of my job now as a casting director is to, when sending out an invite to do a tape to somebody, is to make sure I arm you with as much information as I possibly can for you to successfully do that. I understand through what I've been told that that's not always, people don't always feel like they're given lots of information, that sometimes what they're asked to do feels abstract and it's difficult to find out. I would say ask questions. If you don't feel like you have the information, do go back to whoever's asked you to do that tape or your agent if you have one, and make sure that you ask any relevant questions. Maybe look up the director, look up the work they've done previously and see how that relates to what you're being asked to do. That's often a really relevant thing because things are tonal, right? And directors are hired to do work that's like the work they've done previously in whatever field that is. And you might start to get an understanding of the sensibility of that director. Because ultimately, when you tape for something, the director is the first person who's probably going to see that tape, or the first person you're trying to impress in that process. And so I think that keying into what their sensibility is and what they're interested in is very, very important. So always looking them up, always asking any questions. And I suppose if you're at the point where you're going to do a tape and you feel slightly unsure about it, don't waste your time doing it until you do feel sure about what you're doing. Ask questions, go back to the person who's giving you the information, ask your agent, try and arm yourself with as much as possible so that when you do that tape, you feel confident in what you're doing.
So a follow on from that then would be, like, how important is it to have an agent? And for actors that don't have them, what's the best way to be seen for a casting?
Well, it's interesting. I think that obviously an agent can help. You know, obviously an agent's going to put you forward for work and is going to hopefully help you kind of craft a career. I think that we're at an interesting point in time. Spotlight, as I mentioned earlier, is changing quite a lot, and they're allowing on more performers. They used to have some very arbitrary rules about who could become a Spotlight member as a performer. And they've sort of they've changed those barriers so that those obstacles aren't there for people now. And so it's much easier to become a Spotlight member. Once you are a Spotlight member, I think you have more control over how you see jobs than you used to. So now, as I understand it, you can see all the work, the casting briefs that go out, or those that are visible to performers, and you can suggest yourself on jobs, you can put yourself forward for work, or you can nudge your agents to do that for you. And I do think things are going to progress further in that direction. There's another casting platform called Mandy, and as I understand it, Spotlight are aiming to move further in the direction the way that Mandy operates, which will ultimately give a lot more kind of freedom and control to performers themselves. I think I guess ultimately it's good to have an agent, and it will be it's a useful thing, but having the right agent is important, not just any agent. And I think that you can do an awful lot for your career yourself as an actor before you kind of join forces with an agent. So I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. And I do think it's, having an agent with whom you have a good relationship and who understands you and is going to put you forward for that thing I was talking about earlier about what makes you an individual and what your sort of points, your selling points are as a performer. Your agent needs to understand that too, and they need to be putting you forward for work that you're really right for. Because in a crowded market, it's an attritional war. Like if I, as a casting director, see you're suggested on briefs and ultimately I keep seeing you and you're always right for the part, eventually I'm gonna ask you to tape for something, because I think that person, I recognize them, I know they're right for this, and I'm going to ask them to tape for something. If you're consistently put up for the wrong kind of work by an agent that doesn't really understand you, it becomes very easy for the casting director to ignore that or to look past you because they're not sure of who you are or why you're being suggested for things. So I think that you can do a lot for yourself as a performer without an agent before joining forces with the right agent.
Just to carry on with agents.
Yeah.
So, and Sam, you might have thoughts here as well. If you're a writer, a director, maybe even a composer or a musical director, is having an agent important in terms of approaching companies like yours and kind of going, how do I get on board, projects like Burlesque, for example, or Bonnie and Clyde? How do they then get to that level?
So having an agent is, they are, I speak to agents every day. They're the ones to deal with the difficult conversations, so their client doesn't need to do them, when it comes down to money and everything else. But yeah, I just kind of delving into that, and what Michael said is that it's so key that the agent knows who you are as a person, because at the end of the day, when I'm talking to the agent, I'm also talking to the client. Even not directly, but that's where the conversation starts. And there are moments where there are some particular agents that may be even more difficult, but, I think as an actor or whoever who needs an agent is to really research their agent as well, because they are representing you. That's what they are. They are a representative of your business, so to speak. And knowing that is that when those conversations are had with whoever, as you said, if they're speaking to a producer, they need to have your best interest. You're not just another number on their books. There is some personal care, and they're there to represent you. So, yeah, I kind of don't know where I was going with that, but I kind of thought in my head where I was, but I wasn't.
And you would say that would be the same for if you're not an actor, right?
Yeah, and anyone that needs an agent, or any representation, there needs to be some personal interaction.
Yeah. I think it's an intimate relationship, and it kind of needs to be. And I think that I've known so many actors and writers. I know quite a few writers as well who, over time that relationship sort of breaks down, and they become two very kind of distant people, and therefore you can't know one another well, and you can't therefore represent somebody well, and really, in that moment, it would be best to separate, but things often drag on longer than they should do, And that's very common, I think. And yeah, I think having a close relationship and understanding one another is vital. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. I think, so the next question was, what are you working on now and what's next? But I think we know what you're working on now. But Sam, no, that's right. Sam, did you want to talk about sort of kind of a bit more about your role within the organisation and kind of actually the bits that you specifically do and what because hasn't your job changed slightly this week?
Literally this week, yes, in the past 48 hours, yeah. So when I was first appointed at, originally it was called DLAP, and then it got rebranded to Adama Entertainment. I was their general manager. And as a general manager, you just oversee every aspect, whether that's casting, whether that's productions, budgets, contracts, interviews of backstage staff, recruiting, all those aspects. But I've just been appointed as now producer for Adama Entertainment. Now I am the lead producer for both Bonnie and Clyde and Burlesque. And that in itself, it's hard to talk about because I'm still learning myself. I mean, there's lots of aspects of as general manager that does producing, but you're just kind of the face of the company. You're there to... I said this the other day actually in rehearsals because I feel like I'm putting out fires a lot, is that you're just a problem solver. So I like to call myself Fireman Sam now because that's all I feel like I'm doing. But yeah, you're just there at the forefront. You're there for all of the creative decisions. You're very much involved in the creative aspects. You work really closely with the creative team, and whether that's the co-producers, investors, however it works. But yeah, so my kind of day-to-day is that, yeah, God, I sit behind a desk, I answer 250 emails a day. I'm on the phone every day. I'm in rehearsals, I'm interacting. It's full on Monday to Sunday, 24 hours. I won't change
Problem solving non-stop.
Problem solving non-stop, yeah, non-stop.
The plans for Burlesque, what are those?
So yeah, there's like a 5-year plan. So with any show, anything that we know has a really good commercial gain. So for instance, Burlesque is doing its stint regionally this year. We're kind of following the Mrs. Doubtfire, Back to the Future kind of module where you put it in the regionals first. It's called a tryout production. So in that is that you get to still develop the show. So you're not, it's not finished at any point. It's always forever growing. And then in 2025, Burlesque will hopefully be going to the West End. And then from that, there'll be a UK tour, Broadway, an American tour, and then we'll do international seas as well. So we'll be going to Australia, Asia. So yeah, I mean, we hope that this show will be going for years and years to come, and there'll be multiple productions on at the same time.
Do you have pressure to obviously cast high-profile performers in those central roles, right, as well?
Yes.
And is that harder to do at the stage you're at? Because obviously you're not doing short runs or in regional theatres at this point when there's a West End run coming down the line. How difficult is that?
Yeah, that was actually probably one of the most difficult things. I've never been part of a casting process that's taken really about 6 months. Like for a musical, that's a long time in my experience. Normally I've done shows like Bonnie and Clyde, we did that in 3 weeks. So that just shows the kind of difference and the scale of what the show needs. The thing is with a show like Burlesque is that you have multiple people to sign off and see the casting. Normally you just have the director, but there's way more difficult people working on Burlesque. I say difficult. They are difficult in their own right, but it's more the fact that there's a lot more at stake. When you're working with a show that the IP is worth £200 million, when you're given that in your hand, you basically cannot mess it up. So there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of sleepless nights, and I've got a lot more grey hair because of it.
Great stuff, thank you. So I think then, just if we can come to both of you, is there any advice that you'd like to give people in the room today, or anything else you wanted to add from our talk, just as kind of a bit of a sum up, and then we'll open up for questions. He's looking at you, sir.
No, I mean, I would revisit what we said earlier about, I think you do have to stay in it. You have to be very, very determined to keep going, I think, because, you know, you talked about being open to failure and, you know, problem solving and those things. I think that the industry will feel like that at times. It feels like it does nothing but present challenges. And being open to different opportunities, being determined and trying to keep moving forward is a really important thing, I think, to have success ultimately, because it's not really, you know, I don't think there is any quick route to it, and it takes a winding path often. So, yeah, I would just return to that idea of be determined but stay open.
Stick with it. And I think, like, definitely from my perspective, that's something that, yeah, it's sticking with it and having that determination. Like people that we trained with, which was more than a couple of years ago, you did mention, I'm not going to repeat that number, but, you know, one of our friends that we trained with this week is off in parachuting a commercial, and he's doing really well in adverts. And then one of my best friends from drama school this week has been seen for Les Mis, had a recall for a new musical, and has been shortlisted for a new BBC sketch show. Right. So it's, you know, that stuff doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. So I think it's just, if it's something you love, you'll find a way to make it work for you. Yeah,
and to be active in that as well. I think that it is also an industry that doesn't open its doors to you unless you're sort of knocking on them. You know, you have to. I think this is the hardest thing, and particularly as time passes and you get older, is to be active in your own right. I think that, you know, people who are appealing to the industry in whatever capacity are people who are busy doing stuff, you know, and whatever that is. I don't think that has to be things that are particularly high level or whatever, but if you are industrious and making your own work or researching things, creating things, being productive yourself, it has massive appeal, and that goes for a performer to any sort of role within this industry, I think, because I think it shows endeavour, and that is a hugely appealing quality, and I think you have to show that to have success ultimately.
I couldn't have said that better myself, actually. No, I think you nailed it. No, I just persevere. As we know in this field of work, is that you are hit with more no's than you are yeses. So it's been able to just have a bit of thick skin, persevere, keep going on. And you know what? If one avenue and one door closes, another one will open, whether that will be the same avenue that you went down originally. Just go with it. As we said, open-minded. There's many more routes. I went down as an actor, and here I am as a producer. Never in my biggest thoughts that I'd ever be in the position I am today. You know, I'm very grateful, and, you know, there was a lot of luck on my side as well. But, you know, just keep going. And obviously your grounding in your sort of early days at the stage door played quite a key part. It all stemmed. I remember standing up there and belting the top B. So, you know, I remember those days.
But do you find that do you find it as rewarding doing what you do now than your days as a performer?
Yeah, in a really strange way. I don't know what it is, because obviously, you know, you go from being a performer, like you want to be that actor at the forefront, you know, leading a musical play or a TV program, whatever, to then being behind that. There's a different reward to that, and I think there are. You know, I'm also in a fortunate position as well, where in my career of growing, I've worked with, you know, people like Rich Spencer, Dan Roy, you know, some people sat here today. You know, there's Katie Tonkinson, who's currently playing Bonnie in the tour that, you know, I'm producing, but I worked with Katie before she was even a professional performer. Seeing that and having that weird, like, cycle of when people that you kind of grew up with and worked with in a non-professional environment, all of a sudden they're now flourishing and doing what they're doing, you know, that's such an amazing moment, and you don't have, like, you know, they did that themselves, you know, and it's always lovely to see. It's always lovely to see how people's careers and journeys change and alter and where they lead on to, in for whatever capacity that is. Yeah, thank you. And Josh, do you have anything to add to that from the role you're in?
No, I completely agree with both of you. I think it is about that determination, but it's meeting people and getting out there and approaching venues and just seeing if you can have a meeting and just have that conversation. And it might not be a case of going, you know, will you put on this piece of work, or you do that. Just having a conversation of just this is who I am, this is what I'm wanting to do, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And at some point, there might come a project, certainly from our point of view, a project or initiative that we're running and go, actually, I remember meeting with so-and-so and there's something there that we can support them with. So it's definitely that perseverance, and it can be hard. And I think one of the key things, certainly from my role, and I know Julianne, you probably agree, with the network is about, reassuring those that are local to Southampton that they're not alone as well, that actually it can be quite isolating to be an artist or be a freelancer, and actually we're all in this together, we're all trying to create work, we're all trying to be, succeed and get our work on, whatever that might be, and to utilise the network and utilise the people that are part of that to rant or have those questions answered or to collaborate. So, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. So then, do we have any questions from anyone in the audience? Let me bring this down to you, just in case. No, go on. We've got them here. We've paid for them now, so you might as well use it.
I just want to ask a question about casting. If a TV show contacts you and say, we want someone for this show, do you get to read a script? Do they just give you a biography?
Casting director?
Yeah.
Oh,
what
yeah,
happens?
yeah, absolutely. So the first part of being brought onto any project will be an availability check, and then we'll be sent creative material, basically, so that we can read that. And it's kind of implicit in the availability check that there's that we're going to look at the material and make sure it's the right thing for us. So, yeah, absolutely, that's kind of built into it. And it does, I mean, obviously, at that stage, it's not always finished. It's not always complete, but, yeah, for sure. And also, a lot of casting work jobs come from pre-existing relationships, so a lot of that comes from directors that you've worked with previously, producers, and so there'll be perhaps a kind of common understanding about the type of work that we'll do or that they might do and that we'll be involved with, I suppose, yeah.
Actually, and on that point, Sam, you said you, Kate Tomkinson, I think?
Katie Top, yeah.
Katie Tomkinson. She's appearing in Bonnie and Clyde, and you knew her before. Were you involved in her casting?
Funny you say that, because there's obviously a thing where, in the industry, nepotism and all that sort of stuff, I try and be neutral. But I was actually having a conversation with Rich downstairs, who's also an actor, and I actually saw a tape that Rich did years ago for a show that I was producing. You have to be impartial, because I wanted their own talents to tell their own story. So when a tape did come in, I say, I know this person, but I think you should give them a listen to. And then I don't have any more say in it after that. But yeah, it's always nice when tapes come through and I go, oh, I know that person, because I try and stay out of the casting process as much as I can. I'll be way more involved in it now, but yeah, in my role as a general manager, I used to see the tapes and I would put a little suggestion in, and then I'll just leave it at that, and then they'll do their own work themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have a question?
So I've kind of become immersed in the screenwriting side for a really long time. Since lockdown, actually, I kind of just started writing TV pilots. Didn't know that was a thing. As soon as I knew you could just write a pilot and go out, I was like, yes. So I'm trying to work out how that translates, because I'm coming back to the theatre. I kind of grew up performing in the theatre, and it's kind of my home. So I'm wondering, you're talking about IP, that's something I came up against a lot in screenwriting. Even if you have an original TV pilot that they love, like mine went to 20th Century, so exciting, except they read it and there's no window. The only track really is that they might like it and they might put you in a writer's room for a show that exists. So on this IP front, I'm thinking, everyone, especially in the UK, everything I write is too ambitious for the UK producers. In America, they love it. Is there any opportunity for original works, or are original writers really looking for that similar kind of routine where they might send in material and they like your writing, so therefore is there anything equivalent to a writer's room? Like, is there script editing work, or what pathways are there for writers?
There are, I know that for a fact, and I think anything that's ever presented to a producer in any context, whether that's TV, theatre, whatever, it is also solely down to the producer and what they believe, one, in the product, but two, whether the product suits them. You know, we get submissions all the time for various work, whether it's musicals, plays, and, you know, it varies on what we feel is suitable for us as a company and what we could do to help. I think that's the most honest, truthful thing that a producer can do, is be honest whether they can actually help you or not help you, or one, you know, take it further as it needs to be. But as far as, I don't know the answer to that, whether the writers, I mean, I know there are many out there, but I wouldn't know exactly the right information to give you.
We've got
for that.
Showtime, and you've got your project at MAST. I'm wondering, is proof of concept the best route if you've got original works? So should we, Showtime, for instance, you bring it in and the singers get up and sing your musical numbers, and then you've got that video, and I'm just curious to see how it translates for writers, because it feels like it's not very transparent, that pathway, like in the UK at least.
I mean, what I know from her is that with theatre, there's perhaps more openness to original ideas, and that IP seems, from my perspective, once removed from her, that it feels that there's certainly more opportunity for original ideas there. I know from her experience that with screen work, she's often reading books looking for IP, and that's part of her job and part of her agent's job, and that they're collaborating on that half the time. So that's one of the massive hurdles, because it feels like, certainly with television and film at the moment, that, or certainly with television, it's you know, there needs to be some kind of IP for lots of work. I don't know, but for theatre, from my perspective, it seems like there's more openness to originals. Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're producing something that's the intention for which is to have a West End tour, or a West End show, or a musical tour, that's different, right? That's going to, you know, musicals, it feels like that's more consistently the case, wouldn't you say, for there to be IP behind it?
100%. 100%. Yeah, that's the best way of putting it.
And another question for you, Michael. Sorry, I know you came in on that one. So when I was doing the acting thing, I didn't I did a little bit of Mount View, but it was a foundation course, but I like to pretend it was the full one. But it was very much, if you hadn't been to drama school, there's no point in going for the audition. Like, how is it now with Spotlight and the digital age and people on social media? Like, is it still a bit stuck up in that way? Or?
No, I don't know that it is. I mean, I'm not sure that it is. The industry is a lot more kind of diffuse than it used to be, and there are lots of because there's so much that shoots here now, and there's so much internationally that shoots here. I think that there's less focus necessarily on where did you go to drama school, but what drama schools do for performers is they give them a pathway, right? So they give them peers, they give them a network, and they give them perhaps representation, or that they will help them find representation at the end of it. So I think that that's very useful. I think beyond that point, beyond that initial launch into the industry, it's not that important. I don't think that people really look at it a few years down the line. Beyond that, they'll be looking at who you are, the kind of work you've been doing, and what your experiences are. So I think that it's great for an initial launch offer, and to create some local network of people that you'll know. But beyond that, I'm not so sure it matters anymore. The other thing I would say is that I have a slight bugbear with drama schools, in that drama schools are sending hundreds of performers into the industry every single year, and there are lots of drama schools have multiple courses and are presenting, you know, 50, 60, 70, 80 actors every year and putting them into the industry. And I think that slightly dilutes the whole system a little bit. So I'm not sure that it has exactly the same impact that it did once.
I could keep going.
Anybody else? No? Okay, that's fine. So from here then, what we're going to do is pop down to the bar, and Sam and Michael have both said if you buy them a drink, they'll try and find you a job, basically. So no, but they are going to stay on and have a drink with us downstairs. So obviously, if there's something that you want to have a chat with them about, please feel free. But I'd like to thank you both very much for coming tonight, and it's been a really insightful evening. And thank you guys for coming along. We've got another one on the 10th of October, yet to be announced who will have, but a similar setup to tonight, that will hopefully give you some insight and information into the industry. So thank you for coming, guys. All right.
Thank you.